All right. We might kick off. I'm conscious of time and schedules, and it's a busy night ahead for those in Australia and day ahead for our friends in the UK. So, firstly, thank you everyone for attending. My name is Kouparitsas. I'm the Chief Customer Officer for With You With Me, based in Australia, but I'm joined on the call as well by many wonderful colleagues in the UK. I mentioned it before, but I do want to say thank you for making the time to come here. I do know it's really difficult to find a suitable time slot that hits both markets, but because we have our great guest speakers from both London and Sydney available to share their insights today, we really wanted to find a slot that we hope most people find suitable. So thank you for those who are joining, and I do know many others are going to be watching the recording after the fact. So yes, today we are going to be digging into one of the most topical conversation points, I think, in financial services at the moment, which is how the sector is shifting from traditional roles and legacy workforce models to skills-based strategies that can really keep pace with the changing landscape brought on by AI, automation, and rising and evolving customer expectations. Before we jump into the meaty part of the session, a quick housekeeping note. I mentioned obviously people will be watching the recording, which means we are recording this session today. We will share it with you afterwards, along with this slide deck as well, and the contact details for our panelists. So feel free to follow up with any further questions that you might have. There will be time for questions at the end. Feel free to pop those into the chat and we can bring those into the discussion if we have time. Otherwise, we can follow up with you afterwards as well. So before I introduce our panelists, who you see on the screen here, I did want to set a bit of context for the conversation. And for anyone who is new to us, With You With Me is the company I work for, and we're hosting the session today. We're an Australian-founded, now global workforce intelligence company that is focused on helping organisations really navigate the skills challenge. In simple terms, we help leaders really understand the capability they have today, the capability they're going to need tomorrow, and the most effective way to close that gap. And our work centres on building really practical evidence-based skills and capability frameworks that reflect real roles, real tasks, and the way those needs evolve as the world of work starts to change. And in a nutshell, we basically map an organisation's people to a global framework so that leaders can make decisions using data rather than that intuition that is typically been relied on. We are also, very importantly, a social impact organisation at our core. We care deeply about what a skills-first approach unlocks in terms of a more equitable and diverse workforce that really creates pathways for anyone, regardless of their educational or career history, has the opportunity to step in based off their skills and the potential, not their pedigree. We do work with many organisations in Australia and the UK in the financial services sector. And across all of them, we do see quite a consistent pattern that leaders are starting to understand the impact of AI and automation. And that's not the stumbling block. The real challenge is knowing how to take a really structured, confident approach and action to support people to move in the direction that the company needs them. And that is sort of at the heart of the discussion today, what taking action actually looks like, what others in the industry are doing, and really just sharing insights into how skills-based transformation is playing out across financial services in both countries right now. And before we bring Claire and Kathleen in, I just wanted to frame why I think this topic is sitting at the top of priority lists for many organisations. I think we've all seen firsthand that the financial services sector is being reshaped faster than traditional workforce models can cope with. Technology, regulation, data, evolving customer expectations are all shifting at once, and entire categories of work are evolving. Roles that were very common 5 years ago, like manual compliance monitoring or transaction processing and first-line control testing, are being reshaped by automation and AI and outsourcing. So that capability mix has really changed overnight. And the old playbook of hiring for experience and hoping that the skills match holds over time just isn't working anymore. And what is separating the organizations moving forward from those falling behind is a shift in mindset. So not focusing on roles, but starting to really focus on capability. And these organizations tend to have a few things in common. You know, they know what skills they have, they know what skills they need, and they know where those gaps are, and they're not waiting for the labor market to fix it. We are seeing this every day through our work with banks, insurers, mutuals, and wealth managers. The pattern is the same. You can't hire your way out of the problem. You do have to build internal mobility. You have to understand the potential that already sits within your workforce, and you need a way to map, measure, and grow capability at scale. And that requires, you know, new thinking, typically a cultural shift in how leaders view talent. But when organizations do start using this skills first lens, even if it's just in a single team, things do change really quickly. You know, talent pipelines strengthen, redeployment increases, and hidden capability surfaces. So I will stop talking, but that is why we are hearing from Claire, who is the CEO of the Financial Services Skills Commission, and Kathleen, a senior executive at QBE. Claire is really, I think, going to bring that valuable sector-wide view, what the data shows and where financial services is heading broadly. And Kathleen, of course, brings her own management and leadership reality from her career, which has spanned QBE, but also JP Morgan and Macquarie, to name just a few. And my hope is that this conversation gives you clarity and some practical ways to approach the challenge inside your own organisation. So we will get into it. And Claire, I'd love to start with you. From your conversations with financial services organisations across the sector, what are the biggest workforce challenges you see them facing right now?
Thank you, Tia, and morning. It's great to be here, and I think this is my most sort of furthest international session I've done with the two countries. So we work with over 50 firms in our membership, and we've been around for 5 years now. And all our firms are in financial services. And we work with firms to understand what skills challenges they're facing, and bring some of our collective analysis to that challenge, but then also work through how firms can take action to address their own skills challenges. And I can spot a few of our members have snuck into the call as well, so hello. The headlines of the things that we're facing in UK, and I'd be very interested to hear if this is the case in Australia as well, but one of the challenges is demographic shift. So we know that as people age, they leave the workforce, but we've got a big challenge in financial services in the UK, because in the next 10 years, we're going to see 260,000 people leave the sector. That's about a quarter of the whole workforce leave because of retirement mainly, but other people may choose to leave work for other reasons, or leave and move to another sector. On top of that, we also know that we've got a skills gap already in terms of people being fully proficient in their role of around 160,000 people. So when you start to add those two together, the numbers become quite scary. If you think we've got 1 million people in the sector and we're going to have to fill those 260,000 that are leaving and properly increase proficiency of 160,000 as well, there's quite a lot of work to do. Alongside that, we've got an ongoing increase in demand for high-level skills. Financial services in the UK, we have around 72% of the roles in the sector are highly skilled. 20 years ago, it's 50%, and in the wider economy in the UK, it's around 50%. So we're very much a consumer, and we need the highly skilled talent to grow the sector. And there's increasing demand from other sectors. The competition for high skilled talent is growing. We also know that we've got skills gaps in technical areas. This is no surprise. So machine learning, AI, digital literacy, etc., are highly in demand, and not just for financial services. But there's also behavioural skills gaps, and this is where our member data becomes really, really useful. So how you apply those technical skills and abilities in the financial services knowledge is really important. So firms are saying they have gaps in areas such as coaching, relationship management, adaptability, and things like creative thinking. And we gather this data every year and produce a report in the spring each year that highlights where those skills gaps are and how it's changed. This is always a moving target. Things are never static in the skills space. And finally, something, I'll be the first person on call to mention AI, but AI and the rapid adoption of technology, particularly Gen AI, but there are other technologies, is just changing what's needed. It's changing the skills that are required in the sector at such speed that there's almost a need to kind of keep pace with that. But thinking long term becomes increasingly challenging because you're not quite sure where you're aiming for. If you make decisions today, are they going to be unpicked in a few months, not even years, in a few months or even weeks with some new technology or something changes? So there's quite a lot of challenges facing the sector, but there is good news. We're certainly seeing the way that firms in our membership look at their skills needs and sort of think about this as part of business strategy is really changing. So I think we're putting ourselves on a positive footing despite the challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, Claire. And Kathleen, I'm really keen to hear, based off what Claire has outlined, you're in Australia, you have worked in the UK. What resonates most from your personal experience? What workforce challenges have you observed over the years, particularly in relation to growing and enabling teams to thrive?
I think for me, the one that resonates the most is the sheer pace of technological change, because it far exceeds anything I've seen over the many, many years. And staying ahead of that is the biggest challenge. And so what we do is we look for staff who are adaptable, comfortable with uncertainty. And it's, to your point, Claire, it's not about hiring for today's skills, but building teams that can constantly learn, flex and thrive as these technologies emerge. And then to address the skills gap, we're seeking talent with transferable skills, those that have got that growth mindset, those that are willing to be flexible. And by leveraging people who are comfortable with that change, we can strengthen our team's ability to keep pace with things as they advance and deliver results in this really dynamic environment. And it's not merely about the hiring, it goes back to that sort of continuous element of learning. So, and career mobility to build that resiliency for the changes. In one of my prior organisations, we actually limited the tenure in roles and encouraged fresh thinking and adaptability by encouraging mobility across the teams. And I think these qualities are really so critical as the industry is transforming right now.
That's a really interesting approach in terms of instilling that culture of continuous learning and constant movement. I'm sure that's quite a progressive approach. I certainly don't see that in many organizations to sort of restrict that tenure, but I do love that line of thinking. And I think, Claire, to move on to the next area, it's a great segue because, what I'm hearing from both of you is this change is needed, particularly, with the big AI word. We know that roles are changing. As you mentioned, Kathleen, you've never seen such transformation before. So we know that we need to be taking a different approach to how we're thinking about building, maintaining capability. But what I would love to understand, Claire, is how are you actually seeing organizations make this shift? Because conceptually, it's a great idea, but there still needs to be a business case, I think, when you move from a legacy way of operating to a new way of thinking. And how are you seeing this play out for organizations in terms of building that business case?
Absolutely, because it is a shift, it is a mindset shift. And to truly have a skills-based approach, it does require some effort, some infrastructure and some change in process, etc. But the business case is kind of really the starting point. And a few years ago, we created a business case for reskilling to actually just unpick and understand the cost in all areas of reskilling employees into new critical roles versus looking at a redundancy and rehire approach. It's quite binary, so it's not a perfect model, but it actually showed that reskilling approach was cheaper. £49,000 per employee cheaper. So when you start to extrapolate that up for a large organisation, that becomes quite a compelling case, and the CFO starts to take notice. But it's about more than that, because what we're seeing is we're not seeing that binary shift of roles. I remember, a few years ago, people would say, "Oh, robots are coming to take your jobs." Well, maybe, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's a gradual augmentation of skills, and this is what we're seeing at the moment, as particularly with Gen AI and agentic, etc. This is chipping away slowly, and people are adapting gradually, and that's ongoing, and that's not going to stop. And as Kathleen says, it's getting quicker. But there's a reason why building on top of people skills and enhancing them is better than just stopping and starting. And there's a really good reason. I'll give you an example. One of our members, Zurich, big insurer, years ago, this is quite an old example, they were looking at their claims handling process, and they wanted to introduce some automation in there. And when they approached this, they thought, we'll get some automation experts in to do this. And they actually found it didn't work because the automation experts didn't understand the regulation, the business case, the customer journey. So what they did is they rethought, they stepped back and said, we are going to offer 12 places to people in the claims handling team and reskill them in this process and actually augment them. And what they found is after that 12 weeks, they had a set of 12 people that they were very, very skilled in. They knew exactly what the customer journey was, they knew exactly what the regulation was, they knew exactly which bits of the process could be automated. So they were incredibly valuable. And I explained that example just to explain that this augmentation, it's layering on. So once you've kind of got that skills-based approach, you really need to get that leadership in place from a business point of view. But there's a lot of examples out there of why this is an easier approach. If you look to hire, it's going to cost you more and you might not get the best outcome. So that reskilling investment is very important. And I've just noticed, sorry, someone's put in the chat some of the stats I mentioned. I will put some links to reports in where you can find those stats as well.
Brilliant. And I do love that example of internal mobility, because I think a very common scenario people are coming up against is you've got areas of the business that the roles are changing, they're being impacted by augmentation or AI, so they're not needed anymore, but you've got all of that incredible institutional knowledge that you don't want to necessarily lose, and you certainly don't want to make people redundant if you can avoid doing that. So being able to identify transferable skills, potential to step into new roles. We've done some work recently with a customer, and that situation was happening in their call center, and we set up a model that essentially used that call center as a farm for tech talent, because the tech team needed to scale. And the idea was, how can we find people who have great customer thinking, great problem solving? They haven't learnt the tech skills yet, but they've got other aspects of that role, and move them into that reskilling. So I love to hear examples like Zurich, because I think it is the way of the future. How can we, invest and reskill our people to keep them really agile? Kathleen, I would love for your perspective on how you think a skills-first approach can really influence practical things in the workplace, like development planning, team structures, and the balance of skills, particularly in a tech function, because, this conversation applies across the entire organization, but I think it's most acutely felt perhaps in the technology teams at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For development planning, it's about not just the current roles and what they need to do, but it's looking at what they'll need for the future, whether they be digital, AI, cyber, etc. And most organizations would have tools available that actually allow you to insert the other behavioral talents that you have, not necessarily technical skills. Could be planning, could be communication, could be languages, could be mentoring, could be many different facets. So those hidden strengths then become visible, and it informs the learning pathways, and it also helps management with workforce planning. When you then build the team, taking it into the team, we intentionally blend the team for that technical skills, the behavioral skills, and leadership skills. So fostering that, it helps foster that creative problem solving, and find that they're better placed to rapidly adapt and change, because they've got this complete blend of different skills and talent. And with the leadership itself, as Claire was saying as well about the coaching, I think you mentioned about the coaching, the collaboration in Zurich and working together, it really helps them navigate that ambiguity. With the one thing we've seen recently with these tools that allow you to map the skills, and these have been available for many years, every other organisation I've worked, including where I am today, we do this today, but they've introduced a new concept of gigs. And what it is where you can actually advertise for a short, could be just 4 hours a week, if you need someone to do some testing, create a plan for you, help with a PowerPoint, etc. And that's a really lovely initiative and idea, because it then gets people moving between different teams, builds a stronger network, you get exposure to what's happening, and you suddenly realise these other talents that are valuable across the organisation outside of your own remit. Gives fresh perspectives, and it's really building up that resiliency within the organisation, knowing that people can move around and can flex and contribute in other areas. It also creates that element of inclusion, the diverse backgrounds, the transferable skills. So yeah, it's the skills first is now being embedded all the way from the development, the team structures, and how we actually build up and construct those teams themselves.
Yeah, and I love the idea of the gig economy because I think it really speaks to the heart of if you understand the skills that are in your organization, it naturally breaks down the silos. I've heard so many examples of organizations, get rid of people in one area while they're hiring in another. And those people that they got rid of probably have a wealth of skills that may not have been relevant for their current role, but they're sitting on an entire history and career of ability that might be able to link in. So that for me is just one of those most fundamental business cases that if you actually map the skills and have that inventory of what you've got, you can pick and choose across divisions and really create that thriving, coherent workforce. So I love to hear that that's in play. Now, Claire, I would love to circle back to something you said before around internal mobility. So, we mentioned we see a lot of roles being redefined. In some instances, those traditional roles are completely, not needed anymore, and new high demand areas are, which does create that opportunity for internal mobility. You spoke about the Zurich example, but are there any other innovative approaches that you've seen, particularly in this internal mobility space?
Yeah, and it's a really important piece to build on what you said. It's actually there's a lot of skills within the organisation that aren't fully utilised, and there's actually a lot of relevancy or adjacency, if you like, of people's skills to roles that they might not be automatically considered for because we're very vertical in financial services. Things are put in verticals, and the horizontal movement is actually limited. But if you get that right, you get more juice out of your squeeze, if you like. It's using people's skills to the best ability, and it's a very good approach. So we've got lots of firms at different points on this journey. So some firms have been doing it for a lot longer, so they're a little bit more advanced in how they've done it. And one great example is Standard Chartered. They've been working on this for a while, and where they've got to is effectively a very clear view of what roles they are going to need, and they have varying views of that, 1, 2, 3, 5 years ahead. But they've got a clear idea of where some roles will be sunsetting and where some will be dialed up and they'll need more resource. They've also done a very clear assessment of everyone's capabilities across the organisation. They've done this for the whole organisation. It's been a long and big job. So they know where people are. Are they level 3 on relationship management and level 4 on cyber or whatever it might be? And they've also then mapped every job role to a set of skills so that they can align people's capabilities to those skills. And once you've got all of that, and there's a number of platforms that can help you with this, but you've got to have the underlying data sound to start with. You can then spot where there's those opportunities. So, for example, where they're creating a role, they've gone through a process of not advertising. They go internally to a talent marketplace, find people with skills adjacency, say you might be suitable for this, come up with a shortlist, and on that shortlist, flag the people that are in roles that might be sunsetting, and they will be kind of prioritised, if you like. And with that person comes a personalised learning journey of where they would need upskilling for certain areas where they might be lacking to get to that full competency. I mean, that is incredible. What that's enabled the organisation to do is pretty much, for the time being, eliminate external hiring and everything. Their internal mobility rates are through the roof. That's not sustainable forever, because at some point they will have got a really good match of people to roles and tasks. So at some point they will turn on external hiring. They'll have to, just the nature of employment. We do see smaller firms making really good progress in some of these spaces in particular areas. So we're either in a particular operational area, actually saying we're going to look at this. This is a priority for us. We're going to rethink this and try this out in an area. We've had one of our banks that's focused on a particular part of the UK, so a kind of fairly sort of medium-sized bank. They focused on, for example, coaching. They said, if we need our workforce to shift and be adaptable, we need to be able to coach them to do that. It's quite scary, all this change. So actually, we're going to equip all of our managers with coaching. And they did that a couple of years ago. And actually what they can see now is these shifts they're asking their workforce to do are becoming that, it's just much less friction in the system of these changes, because they know that they've got that coaching kind of mindset in from a management point of view. So it doesn't have to be eating the whole elephant in one go, because that's quite big and it takes some time. But you can introduce elements of this because layering on that augmentation, that layering of skills that you've got in the organisation is the sweet spot, really.
Definitely. And I think you make such a great point as well about how technology can do some of this heavy lifting now, because I think once upon a time, the idea of building a capability framework probably sent shivers down the spine of L&D and HR leaders in organizations because it was incredibly manual. And that's when we did start to see a shift towards using skill ontologies, which are enormous but very shallow. But now that we do have technology and AI that can do those multi-level robust capability frameworks, you get that really rich view into what someone can do at what level, what that precise granular skill gap might be, and how that can link then through to, you know, training and professional development, which is so wonderful to see. And Kathleen, I know you and I have previously spoken a lot about some of the extraordinary internal mobility initiatives you've seen throughout your career. Do you want to share a couple with the group today?
Yeah, more than happy to. The standard one we see the most is really around the customer service facing staff, whether it be retail, hospitality, coming into service desk, and then moving up through the organisation into engineering roles or identity access management, cyber roles. Or we've had recruiters or people-based aligned teams who are hiring for technical staff actually then move into the technical group itself, out of the people team, to do IT requirements gathering, because they demonstrate that adaptability, the growth mindset. They've now got a basis in the technology. But I think the one standout one for me was I had a professional rugby league player from Cronulla, Hunter Magners, who actually was looking for, he'd had some injuries and he was looking for a career that would see him beyond the 30, 40-year-old. And he came into tech, started off as a desk side engineer, etc. And now he's doing architecture now, solutions architect. But for him, it was about what he brought was the teamwork, curiosity. He was so eager to learn, so desperate to create the second career, and that resiliency. Even if things didn't work, he kept on doing it. So each of these different ones, whether it be the recruiter who's now tech, the customer service external retail's come across, every one of them brought the customer service of problem solving, eagerness to learn, etc. And it gave us a lovely blend in the team, completely different skill sets and different approach, different ways of looking at things. So yeah, I've seen some very successful hires externally as well as movements internally.
And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about taking a skills first approach, that you do eliminate the bias that would previously probably have prohibited someone like that from stepping into a role because he hadn't previously held that position or it wasn't on the resume. It really does, unlock pathways and opportunities for people to earn positions based off either their skills or their potential to learn skills, which is it's a great impact to be able to make, I guess, as leaders within organizations. Claire, one of the biggest blockers I hear leaders talk to us about is visibility. So, not knowing the skills that they have or not knowing what they need. How have you seen organizations approach this and tackle this challenge?
Yeah, it's a really good question because you've got to have some infrastructure in place to do this. So you have to agree on what skills are and what you're talking about. So having some sort of skills library, some sort of skills taxonomy. So if you're talking about project management, you understand what that is and what good looks like across the organisation. So people, a variation of people's ideas. There's a lot out there. So we have a basic skills framework with 13 skills that firms are prioritised. There's a lot out there. There's all sorts of taxonomies. Just this week, the UK government have published its own standard skills classification, which is a whole load of tasks and skills and occupations, and they're all linked. So that's just coming out and being used in the UK. So that's the first bit. You need to know what you're talking about. Then you have to align it to your job roles and what you are getting people to do. So you've got a skills articulation of the job roles. And then you need to look at what people have, what the capabilities are, and assess everyone's skills. And these aren't quick processes. I'm saying them very quickly like they're nothing. They take time and effort. And what we've done at the Commission is we've built some of the tools and the toolkits to help firms do that, to take out some of the pain. And one of our fairly large members said a few years ago, the future skills framework we have is 13 skills. It's not all of the skills you need for FS, but there's the priorities that our members have told us are priorities. And this firm said, we've taken your toolkit, we've adopted it, and we've looked at it, and actually we're just going to use it. It's fine. It's been built by firms. We think it's good. And you've saved us a year because we would have gone and built it ourselves or paid lots of money for it. So that's the kind of thing we try and do with our members, is just get ahead of the game. Then what you also need to do is forecast where you're going to be. Now, that's quite tricky, because if you go to head of risk and you say, you know, what skills are you going to need in 3 or 5 years? You just get to say, well, I need more of the same. So you do need to go through a process with leadership about how operations are going to change and what that might need in terms of different capabilities. And of course, that's being turned on its head again with the introduction of agentic and other automation. So these are sort of foundations for this approach. You can't do this without moving forward with those foundations. And once you've got all that, it goes back to your three-way diagram at the beginning, Sia, that then you can bridge the gap. Then you know where your gap is. Then you know what you're trying to fill. And it means ultimately we're hearing firms say they're spending less on training because they're actually getting more targeted, more specific, more purposeful about where people's skills gaps are, so they can just be way more efficient in terms of training investment.
Which is such a huge bonus, because I think, again, historically, when it comes to L&D, you know, you might have a certain amount of money set to every person, and that's generally driven on the whim of the individual in terms of what they think they need to learn to take that next step. And if you can find that way to drive that, you know, data-driven view that's supporting the organization's objectives, but also saying to the individual, if you want to strive to step into that next role, or if you want to, you know, move in that direction, this is what you need to do. It's a win-win on both sides. Kathleen, what about your perspective on this? What approach have you seen organisations take to increase skills visibility?
Yeah, very similar to what Claire, the example you gave earlier with Standard Chartered. I've seen the similar applied in the organisations I work, whereby they use HR tools to actually document the current technical skills, but also the soft skills, and then individuals will contribute to that and add in the added skills that you have, whether it be from other interests, or they may have applied for a role that needed specific skills, but their previous experience is relevant and can be leveraged in other ways. So it's giving the organisation visibility to what they've done historically, or if they're involved in mentoring, etc. So the employees would also update their skills, so we've got that visibility. And then we also have pathways for individuals, depending on what role, the types of skills they'll need, whether it needs to be curiosity, creative thinking, planning, attention to detail, etc., as well as the more technical skills as well, whether it be programming languages, etc. So we can then offer very tailored learning education programs for that meet their needs. So the solutions are there. To your point, the efforts in the actual setup originally, but once you've got that set up, once you encourage individuals to use it and see the benefits of going on a gig, understanding another role, understanding potential new pathways, career paths, etc., then people get more and more engaged and leverage it more fully.
Love it. I'm just conscious of the time, and we're probably needing to move to our last question, and I might pose the same one to both of you. And I think it's a very practical one. You know, we've got many leaders and organizations on the call today who are likely joining because they are starting this journey or they're in the early stages. And I would love for you both to share, perhaps starting with you, Claire, what are the first actions you'd recommend for leaders wanting to move in this direction? Yep, mute.
I'm on mute. There you go. Well done, me.
It's always got to be once in a meeting.
Exactly. It's a good question. I think the first thing is you have to have some sort of leadership on board to drive this. Now, whether that's across the whole organisation or a particular leader or manager in a particular area, I've seen examples of both. So, for example, one of our insurers, it's with the head of underwriting who's bought into this and is doing it in partnership with HR. Other organisations do it, you know, enterprise-wide. So you need some sort of buy-in to this. Then it's about all of those pieces I mentioned together, the pieces of the jigsaw. You know, forecast what you're going to need in the future, assess what you've got, and then it's about bridging that gap. That's what it is. And those things are hard. There's an infrastructure, there's effort involved in building that knowledge, that data, so that you can lean on it and get the benefit of a skills-based approach. But I think Kathleen mentioned something which I do want to pick up on because it's really important. It's about learning culture. you need to bring colleagues on the journey with you, and that in itself is a big task. So explaining, why are we now talking about skills? My job description is my job description. Why are we talking about skills? That's really important, bringing colleagues along. So that colleague engagement has to be built in, and what the benefits are, why this is beneficial, why this is helpful, how you're going to go on the journey with them. That needs to be built in, and it won't be for everybody. There's definitely some people who aren't up for the journey, but majority of people are. But it just takes a little bit of thought.
I think that's a really important point, because another thing I hear very commonly is, can we just use AI to tell us the skills that our people have? And certainly a lot of solutions in market do that. And you know, there are aspects of what we do where we can use that as a starting point, but something that we always advocate organizations to do is to ensure that their people are involved in that process, and they're doing their self-assessment, and they have a bit of a voice in that process to be able to say, this is where I think I am. Because if the intent of that exercise is genuinely to be creating an agile workforce where people are constantly skilling and moving in that direction, you can't tell someone what they can and can't do based off an AI assessment. You have to have them, exactly as you said, Claire, really leaning in, engaged in that process, and actively wanting to grow with the needs of the organization. So I think that's a really powerful one. And Kathleen, what are your key pieces of advice here?
I think I'd start off by repeating something Claire said about, you don't need to eat the whole elephant at once. So start small, but start now. The future workforce isn't waiting for perfect plans. It's built by leaders that are willing to experiment, listen, and learn in real time. Make the skills visible, value potential, to your point, Claire, as much as, Sia, as much as experience, and create an environment where curiosity and growth are the norm. Organisations that thrive will be those that treat skills as a living asset, mapping, nurturing, redeploying talent at the same speed as we're changing. So that would be my wrap up and recommendations.
No, I think they're powerful, wonderful last words, Kathleen. Thank you for that. Now, I do see a question in the chat that I will read out, but if anyone has anything else for our speakers before we wrap up, please feel free to pop it in to the chat. This question was from Valentina, and Claire, it was for you. Valentina said she works as an asset manager where tenure and specialised roles are very important to us, but critically our clients, for example, large pension funds, it's important for them. Clients scrutinise our retention and actively look for portfolio managers with many years of experience. So limiting tenure for us would be counterproductive. It also means career mobility is very hard. How would we go about skills development in this environment?
Good question. I think there's probably a number of things here. I think, again, it's not about it's not about limiting tenure. Actually, are you equipping those valuable employees with the right skills as things are changing? And I would imagine there's probably questions coming down the track of how some of those portfolio managers are using technology to augment their judgment, but actually still being human in the loop and using that judgment. And I would imagine there's starting to be questions in that space. But then if you step back and think, actually, what's your long-term strategy here? Those portfolio managers aren't going to be with you forever. They will leave the workforce at some point. And actually, how are you building the capabilities of people coming through to replace them? Are you thinking about the skills that those people need and building up that expertise and potentially augmenting it with AI? I mean, I was speaking to the CEO of one of the very large asset managers in the UK, who's actually thinking, yeah, I've got these very experienced people that are critical to the organisation, but how am I bringing graduates through? Do I just turn off graduate recruitment because AI is going to do all that? But how does that feed my career path and the supply of that talent into the future? But how can I use technology to augment what they're doing already? So it's not a very coherent answer, because I don't think it's a really single response. You will have to meet your client needs, absolutely, but I think the way that you can meet their needs and the way the clients will be asking the question may well change, but also thinking through your long-term career strategy and your strategic workforce plan, you're going to have to think through, what does that look like in terms of roles, knowledge, augmentation with Gen AI in particular. So this isn't about getting rid of length of tenure. It's about that evolution of people's capabilities and skills. And I know some of our members, and actually I think one of our members on the call who's a really great regional bank, has got incredibly long length of tenure, which is incredibly valuable to the organisation, but does create some challenges with that movement. So it's not a unique problem to yourself. Some firms are facing it, and trying to work out what the best fit for their future is, and where they can take people on the journey.
That's a great answer. Thank you. It doesn't look like we have any more questions for now, so I will just encourage you, if you do have anything, to please follow up with us afterwards. And just again, thank you so much, Claire and Kathleen. I think just for both the depth and the honesty that you brought to today's discussion, I've certainly found it to be a very valuable conversation, and just love hearing about practical ways organisations are actually tackling this and the reality of the shifting workforce. A few key takeaways, and I will circulate this afterwards, but I loved sort of the line of thought that you can't hire your way out of this challenge. We do really need to be looking at what we can be doing to lift internal mobility and capability. And certainly, Claire, I'll circulate some of those resources and the case studies that you shared on that. I think also a skills first approach is really giving leaders clarity that they've probably never had before. I think traditionally we've gone after this based off gut instinct, but now being able to have ways to actually measure the gap, what that means in terms of preventable productivity risk, what capability exists, what upskilling needs to occur is really valuable, and we should lean into that. And then I think just the final point is the organisations that are really making progress here are the ones who are pairing, technology and the capability that comes with that with a very deliberate people-first strategy. So you have to engage your people on this journey. It can't be technology and people as two separate entities. They have to come together. So yes, as I mentioned, we will send a copy of the recording around so that you can circulate that if needed, or revisit parts of the discussion that were valuable, as well as this deck and the contact details for myself, Claire and Kathleen. So yes, thank you again, everyone. We appreciate it. If you are in Australia, good night. Have a wonderful evening ahead. And for those in the UK, have an excellent day. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.